This episode was previously recorded April 2024. Welcome, everyone, to the Fit Beaute Report podcast. I'm your host, Christina. In today's episode, we have a very special guest here, and I am so excited to be talking to Rick Tapia. You guys, he is a blockchain lawyer, so it's really good to have him today and just get to talk to him and to listen to what he has to say, guys. So, welcome, Rick. Thank you for joining us.
Great, great. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome, Rick. So, Rick, tell me a little bit about yourself so that, our audience can get to know you and just, a little bit about your background and, what law firm are you at and, what are you doing in, blockchain, law?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, appreciate the introduction. Yeah, I wear a lot of different hats in the blockchain space. So I've been in this space since 2016. As you mentioned, I am an attorney in this space. I work for Bull Blockchain Law. We are a law firm based out of Philadelphia here in the States that specializes in blockchain and digital assets. I also am a founder of a legal tech company, so I wear the founder hat as well. In addition, I do some ad hoc general counsel work for a syndicate of family offices that focuses exclusively on digital assets as well as an RA as well. So I do a lot of different things in this space. But really, my passion is really working with startups and emerging companies in this space, really because it gives an opportunity for a democratization, right, of people building in this space and having an opportunity to succeed, not in ways that we've really seen before, really in human history. So it's definitely my passion and excited to help people in this space.
Oh my goodness, that is a lot, guys. So we have a lot to unpack here, and we have a lot of good things to listen to about what Rick has going on. But then also, too, it's just good to know from a law perspective, Rick, what do you see right now where the actual blockchain is going? Is it here to stay? Are we really going to see this utilized? Is it not? Is it going to be in our lifetime? Or do you think that, progression is really slow and adoption is just, when will it get there? What do you think?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I kind of look at it kind of like in two buckets, right? So you kind of have this kind of front-facing world of crypto where people see cryptocurrencies and NFTs and they see meme tokens and they see, SBF and FTX and all these different things. That's kind of how I look at kind of like the front end of the space. And then on the back end, you have really what I like to call like the inner plumbing, right? So when you look at kind of like how a refrigerator works, everybody knows it just keeps your food cold and keeps it from spoiling, but nobody really knows how exactly it works, right? And I think that's the side of things that you're seeing in the blockchain space that are really taking off is kind of this back end plumbing, right? So you see a lot of, working behind the scenes for different agencies and different financial groups to work on tokenizing, different assets such as stocks, real world assets, real estate, really any kind of really real world asset you can think of. Gold is a really popular one as well. And that's really kind of happening on the back end, right? Because the reality is that the blockchain technology really kind of affords a way to create things such as faster settlement, allows you to really kind of expedite a lot of the KYC and AML processes that we have today that really can kind of bog down a certain transaction given kind of its nature. So you kind of have really this back end where you see really a lot of governments and big financial groups that are really working to build in this space, on top of kind of what you just see kind of on the front end as well. So to your point and to your question, I definitely think the technology is here to stay. But I think we're starting to kind of see kind of this institutional side of things and then this retail side of things, right? And I think, we have agencies like the SEC that kind of have certain things to say about this ETFC, as well as kind of Congress as well jumping into the fold. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting next 12 to 18 months in this space, given that, here in the US, it is an election year as well. So yeah, a lot to think about for where the space is going and where it's heading.
Yeah, definitely is an interesting year where we're heading for sure. And I think that also too, I think that blockchain has, really changed the way that we are just seeing financial obligations or the financial sector, for those who understand it, that want to understand it, that took the time to understand it, and know that that's the direction that we're heading in with the financial groups. So many big financial groups that are actually moving in that direction. Do you believe that it will be anytime soon, like in the next 5 years, or what do you think? How many years, or when do you think that it'll actually be adopted fully, or see more adoption in that space?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think one of the big concerns when I talk to people building in this space and with regulators and people in Congress is we really want to develop a regulatory framework that does kind of balance consumer protection, right, without stifling innovation, right? And I think the reality is we're already starting to see that happen where we are stifling innovation here in the US because we see a number of companies that are forced to build offshore. Look, as a prime example, I have consultations with people building in this space seemingly every day. And when I talk with them, I get excited alongside them, right, with what they're building, the things that they're doing to impact really the world, right? But then I get to kind of the nitty gritty of, okay, well, from a legal and compliance standpoint, you really can't do a lot of things that you want to do here in the U.S. given the current regulatory environment. And that kind of pains me because look, I'm a U.S. based attorney. I was born and raised here in the States, and I want these businesses to build here, right? America is really built on being the pinnacle of financial and technological innovation. And what we're doing right now is really driving those type of businesses away. And the reality is, if they leave, I'm not so sure that they'd be willing to come back, right? So I think we really have to take a position of saying, hey, look, this is kind of a line in the sand, and we really have to start advocating, for thoughtful legislation, or else we're going to really risk falling behind.
Wow, I know. I think that Latam is very far ahead of the game. So is, I mean, even, Europe, they are actually adopting this too. So for those who are not familiar with blockchain, um, can you tell us a little bit about what this technology, why it matters, and, to the point of like, if you don't know about blockchain technology, if you're not using any crypto, why should you care?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, right? So I think the heart of blockchain technology is really democratization, right? It does create the ability for democratization, right, and create the creation of really new ecosystems for businesses and technologies and emerging ecosystems that we really have never seen before in human history. I mean, at the heart of it, yes, blockchain is just really an accounting ledger, right? That really kind of accounts for different transactions between different parties, but it spawned a new wave of financial and technological innovation that we really haven't seen, really in this century, really or even really in the previous one. So I think really when people look at blockchain technology, I would encourage them to really just look at the technology and see kind of more of the practical use cases behind it, and not so much kind of, as I like to call it, the window dressing, right? Where you see the meme coins going up 100x, where you see fraudsters like SBF and other companies, which, we definitely need to focus on those things to an extent to make sure we protect consumers. But I think we need to kind of peel it back and say, hey, look, what's really why this all kind of started in the first place, right? I would encourage people to look at the Bitcoin white paper and really understand what it really meant to have a decentralized economy that doesn't have a need for intermediaries like banks, which really kind of plays into the regulatory landscape that we're seeing today, because quite frankly, legacy banking systems, due to blockchain technology, really would not have much of a utility in a number of cases, right? Like, so we see, for instance, a good example, and you mentioned Latin America. So we have a lot of clients that are here based in the US and that have a lot of friends and family back home, and they're looking for ways to be able to send remittances back home in a way that, excuse me, that allows them to save more money, reduces friction, and to be able to do so in a way that's pretty timely as well. And blockchain technology offers the way to do that instead of kind of currently existing regimes.
No, yeah, absolutely. And for me, I feel like blockchain has really transformed the way that I also do business, because a lot of people, like you said, I don't want to use talent from Latam or overseas, but unfortunately, as a founder myself, sometimes we find ourselves having to do that. And a bunch of the talent that I have hired is asking me to pay with crypto. And my whole, response to that was like, really? I couldn't believe it. And they're like, yeah, our bank charges us less fees so that we can turn it into, what they need to pay for, or wherever they're choosing to purchase things, items, or whatever they're buying are accepting it. So it's just like, then it's just like there's no fees. And so, you know, like you said, protecting the consumer. I've been doing a lot of research too on, prepaid debit cards, and just I did a whole deep dive into the Kardashian card. So I'm getting a little bit more familiar as well with the consumer side of debit cards and the fees. And just, it's outrageous. Some of the fees that they were charging on that Kardashian card. And, where the government, they had to shut it down because it was just not ethical at all. And they wanted to, their attorney claimed they want to remain ethical. And so those fees on the blockchain are a little hefty sometimes. I think think at the very beginning that was one issue, where many people, we see we're living in a times where the majority are not in financial security or financial yeah, security, like, and that will be able to afford those actual fees, from those transactions, from what's costing to burn, so that they can, mine it, and the miners can get paid, because there is no banker sitting there. It's a miner that's sitting there that's doing your transaction. And of course, the highest, fee is the one that's going to get burned first, so that you can get your money, sent peer to peer, or so that it can get written in a block on the blockchain. And I understand that. Do you think that that's part of the regulation side, that also too, that Congress or our congressmen are trying to figure out? And, are they trying to come in to make fees, for themselves, as well as adding fees? Or do you see it just being where they want to just tax whatever, that you're trading, or that you're gaining gains from, profits from, with what your assets are, and, in your digital wallet?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the answer is all the above, right? I think the government kind of wants their hands in every pot they can get it on. I'm, a very staunch advocate for limited government and small government, and that definitely filters into my views on taxes, which I think it's definitely apparent that the IRS definitely wants revenue from your Bitcoin transactions, your crypto transactions, things like that, your investments, which I think to some degree, you should pay normal taxes. That's how we're able to have services here in our country. But I definitely think, there's a bigger agenda to, I think, really stifle crypto and blockchain technology. And I think, part of that is, taxing people who are utilizing it and businesses that are building with it as well. Again, kind of a practical example, the IRS, has put out, some different guidances and notices recently regarding, businesses that are transacting, with people building our wallets and cryptocurrencies in the space, to where, quite frankly, a lot of businesses are just not going to be able to fully comply with it. And this is not legal advice or anything. It's kind of more of, hey, practically, what are some of the issues that current guidances and regulatory frameworks are really presenting? But I think, kind of to your earlier question, I wanted to touch on this. I think for as many, innovations and abilities that blockchain technology has kind of brought to the world for remittances and other different things, there is kind of a dark side of it as well, or a side that really needs to be scaled and improved. And one of those, as you mentioned, is transaction fees, which the problem is now there's kind of a million and one, it feels like, different blockchain protocols, to which, if you're kind of new to this world, it can be very overwhelming, right? So I think focusing on kind of education, for initial users of blockchain technologies is still vitally important, especially once you start looking at our lawmakers and judges and other people in positions of leadership and authority. So we have a long way to go, but definitely it starts with the end user as well. And obviously as well, you do have a lot of issues related to scams, right, that have kind of come forth as a result of this technology, unfortunately. When you look at it, sometimes technology can be used for good and sometimes for bad. And, us as kind of humans by nature, we kind of tend to spotlight the bad things, right? That's what makes the news. That's what drives the headlines. So, seeing stories of the scammers and people losing millions of dollars, or the market crashing and people losing their life savings, makes for more sensational headlines. But the reality is, I think, with many different things, the truth is somewhere in the middle. And I think the reality is we need to look at that and say, hey, look, there are some things that we need to really address in this space, but the ways that it can really help, humanity as a whole, certainly are very much plausible.
Yeah, definitely is. And I know that this topic, I mean, we can spend hours. I know I can, really geeking out on it. And so I do want to touch on you as a founder now, because I know you're a lawyer and I know that, this is your specialty is the blockchain and fintech. I'm imagining fintech as well, right? And just the Web3 space. And so that's awesome. So now let's put on your founder hat, and I want to ask you, what is your company, and what does it do?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I started a company called DraftChain.ai, and we are a legal tech company that focuses on providing AI trained agents to different lawyers and attorneys all across the globe, and providing them their own personalized agent to help them research, and draft certain clauses for agreements, and really just kind of be that supplement to them with utilizing AI. The interesting aspect is we actually also utilize blockchain technology as well on the back end to help create an entire architecture that allows for the creation and self-execution of drafted contracts and agreements as well. So, we're set to launch probably into Q4, into Q1 of next year. We've had a lot of interest from people in this space that really realize that there is a need for this. And look, there are a number of legal tech companies that are really focusing on, supplementing and helping attorneys. Some are kind of going the opposite way and going straight to consumers, which I think, there's something to kind of be said about that, not only from a legal standpoint, but I think from an industry and practical standpoint as well. Yeah, so that's a little bit about the company that I've started, and I've had a lot of years of working with different startups and founders in this space, and the reality is we saw a market need, in a niche that really allows for us to fulfill a need for the marketplace, and yeah, we'll see where it goes.
That's so interesting. I know AI is another topic that you guys, I'm sure, are a part of, especially on the legal side of it, on the AI. And it's interesting that you're actually, well, you're very moving into the space, and you're more futuristic than I think that some lawyers or some attorneys are not so much. And so, was that part of the reason why too you chose the AI, and so chose to help like other attorneys so that they can get familiar with it? And also too, is it just for attorneys in your sector, or is it attorneys like across the board of different sectors?
That's a good question. Yeah. So I think to your first point, it definitely was part of my inspiration in realizing that just as an industry as a whole, the legal industry is by far one of the most slow moving and slow to advance industries in the world. That's both for good and bad reason, in my opinion. But I think nonetheless, as we're entering, the dawn of AI, as they see it, as they say it, there needs to be a way to kind of help bridge attorneys into this new era, because the reality is, and this is just kind of my personal opinion, I think attorneys and law firms that don't really grasp and understand emerging technologies such as AI are really going to run the risk of being left behind. We already kind of see a number of different studies, and I'm not a doomsday person by any means, but I think the reality is AI technology will disrupt a number of different industries, and that includes the legal industry, right? So I think, kind of having that foresight is something that I think is something that I've talked about with my team, really extensively about when we were building out this company and this system, because we realized that this is going to happen. So we want to provide attorneys a way to not only be educated, but have a way in participating in a lot of the upside of this as well. So yeah, that's kind of part of the reason behind it. But I think, and I'm sorry, what was the second part of your question? I'm sorry, I kind of went on a little bit of a tangent there.
No, you're fine. I just, no, yeah. And if you can like give some examples of, why, attorneys should, start using AI, for those attorneys who are just like, no, I don't think so. No, I don't need it. I think that that'd be a good question, but just in general as well, to hear from an attorney's perspective, the listeners who are listening, like, why it is important to start using, the AI. And to your comment that you said, you're gonna these attorneys are going to be left behind.
Yeah, so there's a couple of different reasons, right? I think for one, the ability right now for it to really supplement your workload as an attorney or even as a paralegal, it's pretty well robust right now. I think sometimes we kind of underestimate, and again, sensationalized headlines will tell you that there's an attorney that used Chat GPT to write a complaint, and it had a bunch of fake cases, and so he got reprimanded for it. And again, it's not a perfect system, but I think what people don't quite fully realize, especially in the legal industry, is that the strides that it's made, even in the past 12 months, when you look at LLMs like ChatGPT 4, it can actually do quite a bit of things. And if you're able to take that and actually build on, your own proprietary, IP and information for different areas of the law, such as personal injury, corporate law, securities laws, criminal law, and really kind of feed the AI a lot of this proprietary information, which is one of the things that we're focused on doing. It really provides really robust resources and information for attorneys and paralegals to build off of. And to your point, kind of more from like a practical perspective. So think about it like this. A good example that I've talked with a few different attorneys in the space is we see an issue now with deepfakes emerging, right? We see, on different websites like Twitter, things that there was something that, was coming up with Taylor Swift, where somebody was deep faking pictures of her and other people and celebrities we've seen it for. But how do you really, when the technology gets so advanced to where you really can't tell if, you and I are talking, if this is a deep fake conversation or not, how does that apply into the legal world, right? So when we look at, let's say, the situation of a police officer with a body cam, and there was an incident where you need to be able to evaluate the video off of that body cam to determine what happened. And it turns out that maybe the video could be altered or edited using deepfake technology. Well, how do you verify that the information on that video was actually true? Did it get altered? If so, when did it happen? And blockchain technology and AI technology can provide a way to help verify that, right? So, like for instance, on the deepfake video, I'm kind of mentioning this example. If you had a token that really was set at the police level, syndicate level, where at the district level, where the token itself was tied into that particular video when it was recorded, and was able to verify the authenticity of that video and also be able to tell you if the video itself was altered, well, that could be groundbreaking for being able to help, kind of reduce that friction of something that's already going to be probably happening in the next 6 to 12 to 18 months with deep fake videos. And so I think lawyers and practitioners, really at every level, need to kind of understand that, hey, these are some of the issues that may not be here readily today, but we don't want to be in a position where we wake up in 12 to 18 months and the genie's out of the bottle and we're not really equipped to handle it, right? And then you start to thinking of all the different issues that can come from it, right? You don't want to see things in situations where people are wrongfully charged, or people get charged for different things that are not true, or people that are harmed. I know one subject that's really kind of been brought up recently as well is unfortunately child pornography, right? When you look at deepfake and AI technology, you can unfortunately, create some of these things. And the reality is it's like, well, the way our current existing laws and regimes are drafted and codified is there needs to be a victim, right? A child, usually a child victim of some sort when you're depicting, child pornography. But if there's no actual discernible victim, even though to you and I, it clearly looks like a child in these different situations, how do you handle that, right? So I think there's a lot of things that we need to be kind of aware of, on the legal side of things, but just as a society of, some of these things that are happening with the technology and how to be prepared for them.
Yeah, definitely is. I know that we've touched on, Web3, blockchain, and your founder hat and your found your company, and also too just about like the future and the problems and issues that we see, and why a lot of these attorneys should go ahead and start using AI. So for the future, looking ahead, what do you see coming for the lawmakers and just the law in general, and for the adoption of this technology? Do you think that we will soon be, have all these restrictions that really keep us from trying to, open up our own digital wallet from the government, and the government's wanting to tax this, because this was never meant to be taxed. This was never meant to be controlled by the government. That's why I really do like it. But what do you see with the government side as what in the future can we expect for this currency to be taxed, and like how is it going to how are they going to tax us with it?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. So I think, you do have to have some guardrails. And I see this kind of, overarchingly just with emerging technologies, whether it's blockchain technology, AI technology, when we start looking at things in the fintech world as well, you certainly need to have those guardrails, right? I think there's no question about that. But I think the deeper question is, okay, well, what does that look like, right, from a practical perspective? So, like when I talk with clients that are building in the space, so for instance, the SEC through Commissioner Hester Peirce back in 2018 created something called a safe harbor proposal. And the idea was is that you as a company could come in and you could build for a period of time, release a bunch of disclosures about your founders, the project that you're building, without necessarily fear of reprieve from the SEC or another government regulator during this time, right? As you're building and working towards decentralization. This was back in 2018 and never picked up steam. But what we're seeing now is, or there's a lot more calls for kind of this regulatory sandbox or the second iteration of a safe harbor proposal. And what we've seen in other jurisdictions like Dubai, the Ukraine, for instance, they've already taken kind of the lead on terms of building out regulatory frameworks and rule books, as well as regulatory sandboxes to work very, very closely with businesses. And I think, kind of the reason why I'm saying all this is because when we look at what other jurisdictions are doing, we need to kind of take that approach. And, we're used to leading from the front here in the US, but I think we really need to take a step back and say, hey, look, this is what other jurisdictions are doing. You mentioned Europe earlier as well. What are some of the things that we can pull from them, to fit here in the US? And I think, to that point, I think really it kind of circles back to really a practical consideration for the upcoming election, right? I think the reality is, and I would encourage people just to kind of do their own research. I'm not advocating for one particular person or group or party or anything, but I think it's pretty apparent when you start to see some of the stakes that are already starting to kind of be raised in this election, right? Because the reality is the future of crypto really is at stake in this election cycle. I work a lot with the Digital Chamber, in Washington, D.C., and we have a lot of conversations about, which candidates and which legislators at all levels are supporting, crypto legislation, or which ones are wanting to really stifle it. And what I would encourage, your listeners to do is to do the same. Look at, your local congressman, your congresswoman, your senators, look at what their policy stances are on crypto, or if they don't even have one. And if they don't, reach out to them and say, hey, look at cryptocurrencies, look at blockchain technology, look at the use cases, and really start to advocate for the space, because that's where things are going to really change here in the US, and it does start at your local state level. It starts in your county, and then obviously it works its way to the federal government level as well. So that's what I would encourage people, because I definitely think there's a lot at stake coming up in this election as well.
Yeah, we Houston doesn't have anything in that. We just got a new mayor though, so just you saying that, it just really struck a chord with me, to really to advocate for it, because we need it. I mean, like, if we are the third largest city, and we don't have anything that's, pertaining to that out here, and I think that we need to start. So thanks for that reminder. Rick, it's been a pleasure having you here, on this episode, talking with you, learning so much, and just being in, learning all the insights that you get to share with us and the listeners. Rick, where can our listeners connect with you online?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, and thank you for having me on. Yeah, so you can connect with me on LinkedIn. You can look up my name, Rick Tapia. I'm also on Twitter as well. I'm at Romero Factor, so you can find me on there as well, or you can just type in my name and I should pop up. Yeah, so I'm happy to connect, and yeah, thanks again for having me on.
Okay, guys. Well, I will go ahead and drop that in the description of this episode so that you guys can connect with Rick on LinkedIn as well on X. And thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode, lending me your ears. Peace and love as always.